A mighty stamina. Mighty Mac was a working class engine who likes to feel important to the Fat Controllers Railway. But unfortunately, he was working too hard nowadays, and causes him to break down. Not only does it annoy Mighty Mac, but the Fat Controller himself. Mighty Mac, he said, I know you're working too hard these days, he said, but you need to treat your hardness and your passengers with respect, he said, which will have to save me from taking you to the works every 6 months, he said. But this made Mighty Mac feel very sad. I only wanted to be really useful, he said to himself quietly. Well, maybe the Fat Controller's right. Maybe I am working a bit too hard, he said. But a few months later, Mighty Mac had returned from the works. He was as good as new, but was not used to his new look yet. Unfortunately, the engines were starting to make fun of him breaking down. Just then, he just came back to the sheds, listening to Hank and the others. Poor Mighty Mac, said Connor, always being yelled at for breaking down, he said. He has no stamina these days, said Arthur. I'm Mighty, and I'm Mac, mimicked Hank, and together we're Mighty Breaking Down Mac, he said. He mimicked again, and the 3 engines all laughed. Well, said Mighty, at least that was uncomfortable, and that's, however, we'll have to get you to kick Arthur out of your secret tender club, he said. But this made Hank feel very cross. He did not ever want to talk about the secret tender club. And with that, Mighty began to talk again. If you four will excuse me, he said, I have some work to do. But unfortunately, Mighty Mac didn't know that he had no job to do. But the next day later, when he found out, he had to be told to be sitting a siding for no more jobs. Mighty Mac soon began to feel down and bored. This is boring, thought Mac. We should be doing jobs, not sitting in a boring old siding. I don't know why the other engines think us breaking down is funny, said Mighty. They're laughing at us for no reason. They probably think you're both being silly, said Duke. Once they start breaking down, he said, that way they start copying you, he said. Just don't let the words bother you, he said. Thanks, said Mighty Mac. I accept that. No problem at all, said Duke, and Duke puffed away. That made Mighty Mac feel better, but unfortunately he was a little bit better. Later he came back from the siding feeling very bored. He even saw Stanley preparing to take his own train. Be careful with the trucks, said Mighty. You know they don't like being bumped. Don't worry about me, said Stanley. I'll get them to move on, he said, and he bumped them hard. Move along, you lot, said Stanley. Let's go. And with that, Stanley was coupled to the trucks and was ready for action. Goodbye, Mighty Mac, he said. Mate, I hope this time you don't get too bored in the siding, he said, and he pushed away, not knowing what he had left behind. This made Mighty Mac feel very fed up. He groaned. I guess Hank and his stupid secret tender club have got more work to do than me, he thought. But the next day later, Mighty Mac's chance came. He had just arrived back at the sidings when the yard manager arrived. He had some urgent news. Stanley has forgotten this brake van in this siding of yours today, he said, and you better warn him before something bad happens to him. Yes, said Mighty Mac. I'm finally free from the siding, he said. He had just gotten coupled to the brake van, and then, without the yard manager trying to find out what else was happening, Mighty Mac raced as fast as he could. When he had just arrived at the signet area, he saw Boko waiting. He saw Boko waiting for him. "Hi, Mighty Mac," he said. "What are you doing with this brake van in front of you?" he asked. "You see," said Mighty Mac, "Stanley forgot his brake van. Do you know that?" Of course I know that," said Boko. "This morning he was telling me he felt like he had forgotten something, and I bet it's that brake van you're giving to him," he said. Yes, said Mac. "Mighty and I are going to do our best to stop Stanley before anything bad happens to him. But you two are not on work duty, remember?" said Boko. "I know that," said Mighty Mac sadly, but he had a plan. "Hey, Boko," said Mighty. "Look." "Hey, Boko," he said. "Look." "Hey, Boko," he said. "Look, Kanan's coming." What? Where?" said Boko. I don't see anything. But before he noticed, Mighty Mac sped away from Boko before his eyes were peeled. Where are you?" said Boko. "I can't see any of yous," he said. At last Mighty Mac was ready. I'm not going to let any engine steal my work. Said Mighty Mac, thinking he could get away with it, and he puffed away. But unfortunately, it went too far. Mighty Mac began to lose his ways. He even raced past by the engine sheds, where the other engines all saw him and felt surprised at him. Mighty Mac even began to race too faster. "Slow down, old boy," said his driver. "You're both gonna crash." "We can't stop," said Mighty Mac. If we do, Stanley will be in trouble, and we know it," he said. "We have to carry on." His driver and fireman were concerned, but Mighty Mac still had to move on. He had just slowed down a bit. They also had to stop at the station, and their faces were covered in sweat. Whoa, said the driver. "You both look ill. Time for your rest. Must get to Stanley now," grumbled Mighty Mac. "All right," said the driver, and with that, Mighty Mac was ready. He raced faster and faster. At last, he saw the goods train, and he had raced past by Stanley without noticing. Mighty, said Mac, "stop!" "Mighty Mac," said Stanley. "Wait," he said. "You guys have got my brake van. That's the one thing I forgot," he said. Mighty tried to slam on his brakes. Luckily, Mac slammed on the brakes, and Mighty stopped. And before they were able to breathe a sigh of relief, they had finally ran out of coal and water, and they had stopped. "See,"
said the driver. We've told you to. You all look ill, they said. From now on, both of your faces are covered in sweat, your funnels have cracked, your wheels are rusty, and you do need to go to the works. Mighty Mac knew this was bad, but he had to accept it. Luckily, Stephen had to shunt him to the yard, to the works to be mended, and this made Mighty Mac feel even more exhausted. But a few days later, when he came home, he was back from the works, and the engines from the sheds gave him a big welcome. The Fat Controller was very pleased to see Mighty Mac up and running again. "Well," he said, "I would like to thank you two for trying to help Stanley," he said, But you sure did run out of coal and water in that time," he said. "You two, you, however, are getting your job back." Mighty Mac smiled. "Really, sir?" he said. "Yes," said the Fat Controller, without any of my engines laughing at you for no reason," he said. They now appreciate you again," he said. "Thank you, sir," said Mighty Mac. "And thank you all of you," he said. I know I've worked too hard, but I promise I'll be better again," he said. "You are a better engine," said the Fat Controller. This time you are back, and I'm proud of it." Mighty Mac smiled happily with joy.